Welcome back. One of the unique facets of video games is how interactive they can be, beginning of course with the fact that in most games nothing happens unless you pick up a controller and interact with it, but on a more complex level, many games also give you various ways to solve problems or present you with different endings to their story depending on how you acted throughout the game. And the latter is what we will discuss in this video, since Silent Hill 2 comes along with 4 different endings. Well, actually there are 6, but 2 of them, namely the UFO ending and the dog ending, are joke endings which are not meant to be taken seriously. So that leaves us with 4 proper endings, which can be summarized as follows. The Leave ending, James escapes with Laura. The In Water ending, James commits suicide. The Rebirth ending, James attempts to resurrect Mary. And the Maria ending, James escapes with Maria. The differences between these endings always begin to show once the player has reached the final confrontation. So let's dive right in and take a look at these 4, beginning with the Leave ending. In all 4 endings, the woman that waits for James in the final area looks like Mary, but in 3 of the 4 endings, it's actually Maria dressed up as Mary. This holds true for the Leave ending as well. In this ending, James has found the strength to accept reality and stop running from his past. And so, he tells Maria that he doesn't need her anymore, to which Maria reacts with anger and disbelief, basically telling him that she's the fulfillment of his desires.
What? You must be joking. But I can be yours. I'll be here for you forever. And I'll never yell at you or make you feel bad. That's what you wanted.
But James does not give in to her temptation anymore and only says that he will finally end this nightmare. Maria transforms into a grotesque monster and starts attacking James, which throws the player into the final boss fight. Once the creature is defeated, it falls to the ground and we can suddenly hear what sounds like Mary's pleading voice, calling out for James again and again.
James.
The game, and this is the same in all endings, will only truly end when the player uses a gun or melee weapon to deliver the final blow to the creature. In a way, it feels as if this scene was a reenactment of James' murder of Mary, except that this time Mary is giving him permission, since the voice that keeps repeating his name sounds like it's begging him to end the suffering. The scene that follows afterwards is the one that shows us most clearly how James has found some kind of salvation in this ending. We see him sitting in a dimly lit room in front of Mary, who is lying on a sick bed, and the ensuing conversation almost feels as if some higher power had granted him the chance to see Mary one last time. At first, James claims that he did what he did because he just wanted her suffering to end, but then he actually corrects himself and admits that he wanted her out of the way, that he wanted his life back. And it's this honest confession that is met with a very powerful reply as Mary asks him softly, "Dattara naze anata wa watashi o koroshita koto de sonna ni kurushimu no?" Which translates to, "If that were true, then why did killing me cause you to suffer so much?" The official localization takes a less literal but equally powerful approach and has Mary reply with,
"James, if that were true, then why do you look so sad?"
This may well be the moment of true salvation for James, because Mary's reply basically shows him that he wasn't a simple, cold-hearted killer without any remorse. Remember how Angela, who probably ended up seeing her own father and brother and every man, accused James of things like,
"I know what you're up to. It's always the same. You're only after one thing."
But Mary's reply here shows that it's not all that simple and one-sided. In the end, right before the murder, James must have been a deeply conflicted man. No one can deny that he had developed a despicable dark side, that there was hatred inside him for what Mary had become. He was suffering from his unfulfilled desires and repressed urges, and it seems that he felt like his life was being crushed under the burden of having to care for his sick wife. Of course, that is not an excuse for murder, that's not what I'm trying to say, and we shouldn't sugarcoat or romanticize what James did, but it is at least possible to understand where all these emotions came from. It's still absolutely fair to condemn James for allowing these negative feelings to consume him instead of being strong enough to overcome them and be there for his wife when she was suffering herself and needed him the most. But at the same time, the sadness that he displays so clearly in this ending shows that he was not a completely cold-hearted monster. It shows that he did still love her. And so in this ending alone, James is able to appease Mary and find forgiveness from her. We can either interpret the whole scene as a supernatural moment where James meets the actual deceased Mary for a final conversation, or is taking place inside his own head. In the first interpretation, James finds actual salvation and forgiveness from Mary's spirit here. In the second interpretation, this scene might represent the moment where he fully accepts the sins he committed, but realizes at the same time that even at the very end, there was more inside him than just hatred and selfishness. Either way, this final conversation shows that James doesn't have to run away anymore in this ending. He has accepted his past, has acknowledged what he did, has been punished for it by the town of Silent Hill, and has now received permission to look to the future again instead of being a prisoner in a world of repression and guilt. Even Mary herself asks him to move on. In Japanese, she simply says, "Shinanaide, please don't die." The English localization takes a less literal approach again here, but it's one that I find very fitting because Mary's English line perfectly sums up the point of this ending when she tells him,
Please do something for me. Go on with your life.
And so James leaves the town in this ending, taking Laura with him. Konami's book Ushinawareta Kyoku, from which I have already quoted a few lines when we discussed the manifestations in chapter 5.6, contains a very fitting summary of this ending, stating, "Genjitsu o ukire, otoko wa kono machi o saru." Accepting the truth, he leaves this town. The in-water ending. If the player rarely heals and frequently runs around with little health, if they regularly examine Angela's knife, with which she probably planned to commit suicide, if they read the diary on the roof of the hospital, or the graffiti that tells James to simply die, well, all these actions will increase the probability of getting the in-water ending. In this ending, James once again meets Maria disguised as Mary and rejects her. Maria reacts with anger and says she won't let him have his Mary back, and then transforms into the final boss.
The problem is, you're not Mary.
No, James, I won't let you. I'll never let you have your Mary back.
And after the ensuing battle, which follows the same pattern in all endings, we see James in the dimly lit room again, sitting in front of Mary. As before, she's talking to him softly, and she does tell him, "You killed me and you're suffering for it, it's enough, James." But this time she dies before she can tell him to go on with his life. James has accepted his past, but he is unable to move on. In this ending, James therefore follows Angela's path. He doesn't need salvation. He doesn't want it. The last thing we see of James is how he picks up Mary's dead body and carries her away. And then we hear and see this.
Now I understand the real reason I came to this town. I wonder, what was I afraid of? Without you, Mary, I've got nothing. Now we can be together.
Combining that with the fact that this ending is called the in-water ending, it seems quite safe to say that James has committed suicide by driving his car into the lake. The rebirth ending. The rebirth ending can only be reached if you have completed the game at least once. In a subsequent run, the player can find 4 ritual objects. Once more, the final confrontation pits James against Maria disguised as Mary, and this time his rejection of her is particularly firm.
I'm finished with you.
What? But I'm what you wanted. Mary's dead. Don't you understand? She's not coming back. But I can be yours. I'll be here for you forever. I'll never hurt you like she did. So why don't you want me?
Because you're not Mary. Without Mary, I just can't go on.
Once Maria has transformed and the battle is over, we see James row a boat across the lake until he reaches a small islet. His final lines while rowing the boat strongly suggest that he is going to attempt an ancient ritual in order to resurrect Mary.
Mary, You look so peaceful. Forgive me for waking you. But without you, I just can't go on. I can't live without you, Mary. This town, Silent Hill. The old gods haven't left this place. And they still grant power to those who venerate them. Power to defy even death.
That means that this ending too is not a positive one, as it shows that James was unable to let go of his past. Instead, he tries to return to the past by using forbidden magic, the result of which we never learn. The Maria ending. It's only when the player gets the Maria ending that we actually meet Mary in the final area, who is enraged by the fact that her murderer now prefers the illusion called Maria. We can assume that she is another delusion manifested by Silent Hill, representative of James' state of mind in this ending, because here we see a resignated James, most of whose answers sound like he's making excuses and is focusing on the negative feelings that had developed within him before the murder. His entire demeanor lacks the deep sadness that we saw during the Leave ending, and instead of showing true remorse, he tells Mary that the 3 years of her illness were long and tiring.
It was a long 3 years. I was tired.
Remember that in the Leave ending, there was a moment of realization on James' part that although he did have all those negative feelings, they were only one side of him, and the whole situation was a lot more complex than that. But here, he has given in to the temptation that is Maria and is unable to experience the realization and salvation that he found in the Leave ending. Fittingly, as mentioned before, the Maria ending heavily implies that his suffering will continue, for when he finally leaves with Maria, we can clearly hear her coughing, which suggests that Maria is going to get sick just like Mary, and James is doomed to repeat the same tragedy he already experienced with Mary. This concludes the current video. In the next one, we will take a look at 2 more aspects of the game that contribute to its uncanny atmosphere. I hope to see you there, and as always, take care and goodbye.